On this Sunday night, groundbreaking movement on U.S. gun control. Senators strike a deal after recent mass shootings.
To deliver literally nothing again was just too hard a prospect to contemplate.
Common sense laws with bipartisan support. Security scare on Parliament Hill, what police were looking for as they scrambled to search vehicles. Soaring gas prices.
Everybody is also in the same boat.
The frustration Canadians feel when it's time to fill up, and the dramatic impact on summer tourism. And safer sports.
I've been describing it sort of as sports' own Me Too movement.
The multi-million-dollar plan to protect Canadian athletes from abuse.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Chris Galis.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with that breakthrough on gun reform in the U.S. For the first time in decades, members of the U.S. Senate have reached a bipartisan deal. Lawmakers are facing huge pressure to take action after the recent mass shootings in Buffalo and Uvalde, Texas. Jennifer Johnson has our top story tonight.
With hundreds of mass shootings already plaguing America's schools and communities this year alone, a group of Democrat and Republican senators made a surprising announcement. They've agreed on a compromise plan to try and reduce gun violence.
Frankly, to come up short in this moment, to deliver literally nothing again, was just too hard a prospect to contemplate.
The yet-to-be-crafted bill would expand background checks for 18 to 21-year-old gun buyers. Both shooters in Buffalo and Uvalde were 18. It would also increase mental health and school security funding, close a gun-buying loophole in domestic violence cases, and give states incentives to pass so-called red flag laws, allowing judges to take weapons away or stop a purchase from someone believed dangerous.
If this is a person in crisis, that's not the time that they should be going out and purchasing a firearm. And this would put a temporary restriction on someone's ability to do that.
The yeas are 223.
The House gun control bill, passed last week, was much tougher. But that version had no chance of getting through the Senate, where 10 Republicans must join all Democrats for the bill to pass. Polls show America's epidemic of gun violence has left most people feeling unsafe.
This is madness. Sick of all this pain and hurt, and I'm sick of the government not doing anything.
Gun control activists wanted a ban on assault weapons or the minimum age to buy one raised to 21. That is not in the Senate plan. Regardless, President Joe Biden says he'll sign it once it gets to his desk.
Enough is enough. We demand change.
The senator's announcement comes one day after Americans protested from coast to coast, demanding action. They included the son of 86-year-old Ruth Whitfield, one of 10 people murdered in a Buffalo grocery store last month.
We decided as a family to go public in our grief. We thought that that was the best way to seek justice for our mother and the other victims of this violence.
If the Senate bill gets through Congress, it will be the most significant gun control legislation passed by federal lawmakers since 1994. Many believe this plan doesn't go far enough, but it is a start. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
And later in the newscast, we'll take a closer look at Canada's gun laws and whether they effectively protect citizens. Ottawa police and Canada Border Security are assessing their sources after a tip led to a lockdown and search of vehicles on Parliament Hill and its surrounding streets. Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson has the exclusive details on what they were looking for. Mercedes.
Heavily armed police descended on Parliament Hill and some surrounding streets on Saturday afternoon, looking for what police then believed was a credible threat concerning explosives potentially in vehicles on or around Parliament Hill based on a supposedly solid tip. But now police in the capital are questioning the credibility of the warning that subsequently turned up nothing, and tell Global News they think they likely received a bad tip, according to 2 senior security sources. The information provided to law enforcement was detailed, according to a source who saw the notice to officers, which included names, photographs, and car license plate numbers. 2 cars were searched and 3 people were apparently detained, but police found no explosives and those individuals were released, according to multiple sources. Emergency call logs obtained by Global News show that police identified one of the vehicles they were looking for at a busy intersection in downtown near the Hill. Officers had someone in custody and a perimeter established around the vehicle by 1:42 p.m. It was cleared before 3 p.m. Just before clearing that scene, police became aware of a second vehicle near the Supreme Court, which they also surrounded and searched. Same outcome, and that scene was cleared just after 3:30 p.m. Multiple police and national security sources told Global News the police action was triggered by intelligence from the Canada Border Services Agency that was deemed credible at the time and resulted in multiple security agencies responding, including the RCMP's Terror Investigation Unit. There are now questions in the national security world about who provided the initial information and how it was verified. The Canada Border Services Agency would not confirm or deny their involvement to Global News, saying they do not comment on ongoing investigations. CSIS told Global News that they have no information and the Ottawa police have not responded to our requests for comment. Mercedes Stephenson, Global News, Calgary.
One of Canada's worst mass murderers will be sentenced tomorrow. Overflow courtrooms have been set up to accommodate the number of people expected to watch the proceedings when Toronto van attacker Alec Minassian learns his fate. Morganne Campbell gives us a preview of what to expect.
Did anyone witness anything? It was a senseless attack that shook a nation and pierced the hearts of many in Toronto.
Very sad. Very, very sad. It's not good.
Monday, Alec Minassian will be sentenced for killing 11 people and injuring 15 others with a van in 2018, terrorizing people along busy Yonge streets in the city's north. Minassian was found guilty of 10 counts of first-degree murder and another 16 counts of attempted murder, but his fate has been delayed for more than a year, while the Supreme Court of Canada heard an appeal in the Alexander Bissonnette case that looked at sentencing of people convicted of multiple murders. The Quebec mosque shooter who murdered 6 people in 2017 was handed a life sentence with no chance of parole for 40 years. However, the Supreme Court recently struck that down as the justices felt imposing consecutive periods of parole ineligibility was unconstitutional.
I think what the Canadian judiciary has demonstrated is that Canada is a just society. We're not reactionary.
And legal experts say those in the body of the court can likely expect more of the same.
That decision in the Quebec mosque shooter case is certain to affect Minassian's sentence, meaning that it won't be able to be stacked in the Minassian case.
Still, it is hoped Monday's sentence will help those who bear the scars of that spring day in 2018.
It will allow those families not to ever return to a normal life, but to get back to something that is, that is free of some of the pain that they've had for so long now. And it's been a long time.
Morganne Campbell, Global News, Toronto.
Some of Canada's most prominent sports figures gathered in Montreal today to address a crisis threatening this country's athletic excellence. In the last 6 months, athletes from at least 5 different sports have come forward with allegations of abuse within their own teams. Now, Ottawa is stepping in with a new plan to battle mistreatment. But as Dan Spector reports, it's being met with some skepticism.
Former gymnast Amelia Klein had Olympic goals in her early teens, but the Vancouver resident says her dreams were dashed by an abusive coach.
You know, you're stupid, you're ugly, all sorts of really terrible things to say to a child. And then just, physical abuse as well.
She's just one of an increasing number of Canadian athletes coming forward with allegations of abuse. In the past 6 months, athletes from sports including gymnastics, boxing, and bobsled have brought forth claims of mistreatment against coaches and other officials. And south of the border, American gymnasts recently filed a $1 billion claim against the FBI for failing to stop a sexually abusive sports doctor.
I've been describing it sort of as sports' own Me Too movement.
At the Canadian Olympic Committee's annual session in Montreal, the fight against abuse was top of mind.
The situation is untenable.
We can't fail this.
In front of some of Canadian sport's most prominent figures, Sports Minister Pascal St-Onge touted multiple government initiatives to hold organizations accountable and empower athletes to come forward. Canada's new Independent Sports Integrity Commissioner will be active as of June 20th. Starting in 2023, if sport organizations can't meet certain requirements, they could lose funding. The Canadian Olympic Committee has also pledged $10 million towards sports safety.
We need to make sure that everybody feels that they can speak out when they're going through difficult situation so that it can be assessed and addressed.
Olympic trampoline champion Rosie McLennan is optimistic, but underlined the shattered trust of many athletes.
There were a lot of ideas, there were a lot of concepts, but like, okay, what's next? Who's responsible for what action items and who's going to be accountable?
Trust is the biggest issue. They don't trust the current mechanism in place. They don't know how they're going to trust the new mechanism in place.
Gymnastics Canada is among the governing bodies accused of having a toxic culture. It is facing a class action lawsuit with dozens of gymnasts calling for an investigation.
The main thing is that everybody did their best to support the victims.
It's easy to have policies on paper. It's much harder to actually enforce those policies.
The feeling among Klein and other athletes encouraged but skeptical. Dan Spector, Global News, Montreal.
Coming up, chilling arrests in Idaho. What police found when they stopped a U-Haul truck near a Pride event. Plus, back in business, the Russian replacement for McDonald's with a new name after the fast food giant left the country in protest. U.S. authorities arrested 31 members of a white supremacist group near an Idaho Pride event. They were found after someone called in a tip yesterday, packed into the back of a U-Haul truck. Police found riot gear, one smoke grenade, shin guards, and shields inside the van, as well as the men. Those arrested came from at least 11 different states. Only one was from Idaho. The suspects have been charged with conspiracy to riot. With the push to get sensible firearm legislation passed in the United States, we wanted to take a closer look at Canada's gun laws. According to the Small Arms Survey, the U.S. has nearly half of the world's civilian-owned guns, despite having less than 5% of the population. Canada has less than 2% of global gun ownership. And while firearms are certainly less prevalent here, gun crimes are on the rise. And tonight, Mike Drolet looks at whether Canadian laws are working.
And grab it with your left hand like this, guide it forward.
Lynn Coughlin is something of a gatekeeper. To own a firearm in Canada, you first need her or another safety instructor's seal of approval.
Sideways, lock it open.
With a firearm in roughly 1 in 4 households, Canada is by no means an anti-gun country, and that doesn't appear to be changing anytime soon.
How many spaces do you have left this year in your courses?
We're now June. We have about 8 seats left in between October and November now.
So the demand is sky high.
Yeah, it's higher than we've had for many years.
Since last week, gun shops across the country have reported a sudden surge in handgun sales, likely in response to Bill C-21, which looks to strengthen gun control laws as statistics show an increase in the use of firearms in Canadian homicides. But gun advocates bristle at the suggestion legal gun owners are the issue.
Anyone that they look behind the curtain a little bit on this whole gun control topic, anyone that takes that time will view it entirely differently.
The events in Uvalde, Texas reignited the gun control debate in the U.S. and by osmosis here in Canada as well. But Lynn Coughlin argues comparing or equating U.S. and Canadian gun laws is a non-starter.
It's false. We have a lot of rules and regulations in place. I mean, the course is mandatory. You have to pass the exam. People can fail the exam.
And while U.S. politicians argue over the merits of background checks, they've long been mandatory here in Canada. Everything is looked at: criminal background, mental health, as well as current and past relationships. Or rather, it's supposed to be. In a letter to the Coalition for Firearm Rights, Public Safety Canada admitted only 10% of personal references on firearm applications were initially contacted, and an unknown number later in the process.
Background or reference checks are probably the most important part of that entire process. The most important part. Yet the government's not doing it. Yet the government tells us we need more laws because what we're doing isn't working.
Global News asked for an explanation from the Ministry of Public Safety, but never received an answer. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
To the war in Ukraine now, where President Volodymyr Zelensky feels confident over the heated battle for the eastern Donbass region.
Українські військові поступово звільняють територію Херсонської області.
During his nightly address, Zelensky says Ukrainian forces are defying expectations in preventing the highly contested region from being overrun. He also claimed Russian troops have suffered 3 times that of Ukraine's losses in the war. Much of the fighting for the east is currently focused in Severodonetsk. The key city is reportedly now mostly under Russian control, despite stiff resistance from remaining Ukrainian troops. It's not quite McDonald's, but it's pretty close for these Moscow diners. The American fast food giant pulled out of Russia, but today, on Russia Day, many branches reopened under new owners with a new name. They are now Vkusna and Tochka, roughly meaning delicious, that's all. Burgers and fries are still the specialty, but you won't find any Big Macs or McFlurries on the menu now. The plan is to reopen all 850 stores by the end of the summer. Just ahead, a better treatment for an aggressive form of cancer. So why is it so difficult for some patients to get it?
You're watching Global National.
Health Canada has just approved a new drug to treat a rare and aggressive form of eye cancer, but the medication is not being offered in every province. Canadians diagnosed with ocular melanoma have very few options, and as Jamie Morocco reports, some patients still have to travel thousands of kilometers to access the potentially life-saving drug.
Come on, let's go.
After 4 months of cancer treatment in Toronto, Victoria resident Sue Johnson is relieved to be able to continue her fight from BC.
Coming home was, it was like being able to breathe again.
The 74-year-old has uveal melanoma. On average, just 200 Canadians are diagnosed each year.
About 50% of those approximately metastasize into life-threatening cancer.
Johnson's spread to her liver. On compassionate grounds, she was granted access to a drug, Kimtrax. A recent study found patients had a survival rate of 73% at the year mark, compared to 59% without treatment. But the closest facility administering the drug, Edmonton, closed to out-of-province patients because of COVID-19. The only other option was in Toronto at the Princess Margaret Cancer Centre.
Initially, the drug has to be administered as an inpatient, and toxicities can occur that need to be managed carefully.
Candace Charles is also receiving the immunotherapy and says she's met patients from every corner of the country.
Imagine you're diagnosed with something that's extremely rare and there are only 1 or 2 cancer centers in the entire country that can treat you. It's not ideal. It really needs to be widely available to patients.
As COVID-19 restrictions ease and hospitalization numbers fall, more options have become available.
Emotionally, we have this attachment to our sense of safety and belonging, and when you take that away at the same time as scare the hell out of people, this has a huge emotional toll. I don't think our medical system ever really looks at that.
Happy to heal while close to the comforts of home. Jamie Morocco, Global News, Toronto.
Up next, how soaring gas prices could spoil the summer season for travelers and tourism operators alike. The Queen has just passed a magisterial milestone, becoming the world's second longest reigning monarch ever. The 96-year-old has just overtaken Thailand's King Bhumibol Adulyadej, who reigned for 70 years and 126 days. Louis XIV of France remains in the #1 spot. He reigned for 72 years and 110 days. The Queen, of course, just celebrated her Platinum Jubilee earlier this month, celebrating 70+ years on the throne. Well, you don't need to hear it from us to know how gas prices are skyrocketing across the country. With other expenses surging from inflation, many Canadians are feeling the financial strain. And if you're hoping to catch a break this summer, it's not looking good. As Julia Foy shows us, prices at the pump are already spoiling vacation plans and businesses.
As summer approaches on the South Saskatchewan River, the Prairie Lily Riverboat is preparing for business, but it won't come cheap.
To top up the fuel tank was around $800 or $900. I'm going to be topping it up again next week. I expect it to be $2,000 to fill this fuel tank on this ship.
Strachan says the rising costs of fuel could cut his customer base.
Tourism is based on people having a few extra dollars, that they can go on a trip, that they can go on a riverboat ride. It's all based on having that little bit of extra income.
In Toronto, drivers putting the brakes on summer trips when the price per litre hit $2.11.
That you can't even go anywhere anymore now. It's pretty pricey. This was like $100 to fill, now it's like $140, $150.
Energy watchers say get used to it.
I think this is the new normal. There are days when it may go a little higher. There are days when it might drop a little bit, but I sense that demand is still very strong stateside. There is a shortage of supply in terms of being able to provide an adequate provision to the economy.
Some provinces, including Ontario, are giving consumers a break at the pump starting Canada Day by cutting fuel taxes. Others are still asking for a break.
I think they're outrageous. I think the government should be taking some of the taxes off.
People are hurting, you know. Something has to be done.
In BC, with the highest gas prices in the country, the numbers aren't dropping.
I drive a hybrid.
So some are moving to hybrid or electric cars.
It's helped me a lot. I feel $600 less.
So whether you plan to travel on a BC ferry or the Prairie Lily Riverboat, expect to pay a little more to play this summer. Julia Foy, Global News, Vancouver.
And that is Global National for this Sunday. I'm Chris Galis. Thanks for watching. Tonight's Your Canada is the Lachine Canal in the center of Montreal. We love seeing Your Canada, so please keep sending your photos to viewers at globalnational.com. Thanks a lot again for watching. Donna's back tomorrow.